Have you ever felt like your life isn't bad, but also isn't moving forward? You work, you try, you're not lazy, but somehow everything stays the same. Not collapsing, but not breaking through either. Just okay. And that okay is the most dangerous thing. I've met people like that. And if I'm honest, I used to be one of them. No big mistakes happened. No significant failures. No stupid decisions that ruined a life. Just identical days, small choices repeated, seemingly harmless decisions made every day. And over time, life doesn't go down, but it doesn't go up either. Imagine a drop of water falling onto a rock. 1 drop, nothing special. 2 drops, still nothing. 100 drops, you still see no change. But if it continues day after day, it will wear the rock down. Your life works the same way. It's not one big mistake that keeps you average. It's a small mistake, repeated every day without you noticing. I used to believe that to change your life, you needed a big decision, a turning point, a wake-up moment. But life taught me something else. You don't become average in one day, and you don't escape it in one day either. You become who you are through what you repeat every day. And the scariest part is, most of those mistakes don't look like mistakes. They look reasonable. They look harmless. They even make you feel comfortable. And because of that, you never question them. In this video, I won't tell you about big decisions. I'll show you the small mistakes you repeat every day, the things quietly keeping you stuck in a life that is okay, but never more than that. And the last mistake might change the way you see your entire life. Mistake 1, you choose what's easy every day. I want you to imagine a road, a downhill road, no effort needed. No thinking required, just step and you'll move. And another road, going uphill, harder, requiring effort, requiring awareness. Every day you stand in front of those 2 roads. And the interesting thing is, you rarely realize you're choosing. You choose to stay a little longer instead of starting. You choose what's easy instead of what matters. You choose comfort instead of growth. Not because you're weak, not because you don't want to be better, but because the easy choice always feels reasonable. I used to be like that. I used to tell myself, taking a break today is fine. I'll be more serious tomorrow. And tomorrow becomes another version of today. Nothing collapses. Nothing is obviously wrong, but nothing changes either. Do you see that? The biggest mistake isn't choosing wrong once. It's choosing easy enough times until it becomes default. I've learned that your life is not shaped by big decisions. It's shaped by small decisions, repeated when no one is watching. A person doesn't become average because they lack talent. They become average because they choose the easy path every day. I once met someone. He always said he wanted to change his life. He had goals. He had dreams. But every day, he chose what was familiar, chose comfort, chose procrastination, chose tomorrow. And over time, it wasn't that his dreams disappeared. It was that he slowly became someone who no longer pursued them, not because of one big failure, but because of hundreds of small choices toward what was easier. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, the small choices you make today, are they taking you up or down? Because you're not standing still. You're just moving very slowly in the direction you choose every day. And the most dangerous thing is, the road going down always feels more comfortable. You don't have to try to drift downward. You just have to not resist it. But to go up, you have to choose. Choose to do something slightly harder. Choose to start a little earlier. Choose to be a little more disciplined. Not all at once, just a little. And over time, those little things accumulate. I've learned that if you don't actively choose the harder path, life will default you to the easier one. Not because you don't deserve better, but because that's the direction most people choose. And that's how average is created. But what makes this mistake even more dangerous is that it doesn't come alone. It comes with something else, something that makes you feel like you're working, but in reality, you're avoiding what matters most. And that's where we need to look at the next mistake. Mistake 2, you delay what matters with harmless tasks. I've had days where I felt like I worked a lot. I was busy, I moved around, I handled tons of small tasks. And when the day ended, I felt like I had worked. But then I asked myself one question, why hasn't my life changed? Have you ever felt that? You're not lazy. You're not sitting still. You work all day. But the things that truly matter never get touched. That's not a lack of motivation. It's a more dangerous mistake. You're using harmless tasks to delay important ones. Imagine a house. The roof is leaking. Water is dripping down. But instead of fixing the roof, you mop the floor. You're busy. You're doing something. But you're doing the wrong thing. Your life is the same. You reply to unimportant emails. You handle small, easy tasks. You choose tasks that make you feel useful, but you avoid the things that would actually change your life. I used to do that, not because I was lazy, but because important things are often hard. They're unclear. They force you to face uncertainty. Sometimes they scare you. And instead of facing them, you choose easier tasks. Not because you're weak, but because your brain always tries to protect you from discomfort. And it does that very cleverly. It doesn't say, don't work. It says, do this first. And that thing is always easier, always faster, always makes you feel like you've done something. I've learned that not all work has equal value. Some tasks keep you busy, and some tasks move you forward. If you can't tell the difference, you can work very hard and still stay in the same place. I once knew someone. He worked all day, always busy, always had something to do, but after many years, his life didn't change. Not because he didn't try, but because he always did things that didn't create change. Meanwhile, another person, less busy, fewer tasks, but every day he did one hard thing, one thing he usually wanted to avoid. And over time, his life started moving in a different direction. Do you see the difference? It's not about how much you do, it's about the quality of what you choose. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you working or are you avoiding what matters? Because if you're not careful, you can spend your whole life doing things that don't create the life you want. And the scary part is, you will always feel like you've tried, but the result will stay the same. I've learned that real progress always lives in the things you most want to delay, the things that make you hesitate, the things that make you unsure. That is exactly where your life changes. But even when you start to realize this, even when you try to choose better tasks, there's still a deeper mistake. A mistake that makes you live your whole life without realizing you're standing still. And that's where we need to look at how you live each day. Mistake 3, you repeat yesterday without realizing it. I went through a phase where each of my days looked almost the same. I woke up, I worked, I completed what was necessary. Nothing wrong, nothing bad, but nothing new either. And if you had asked me back then, I would have said I was moving forward. But the truth was, I was just repeating. Imagine you are walking, but instead of going in a straight line, you walk in a circle. You still take steps, you still move, you still spend energy, but you go nowhere. That's how many people are living. They're not standing still, they haven't given up, but they repeat the same day with the same thoughts, the same actions, the same results. And the dangerous part is, that repetition feels safe. You know what you're doing. You don't have to face anything new. You don't have to take risks. And because of that, you don't realize you're stuck. I used to think that as long as I worked every day, my life would automatically change. But life doesn't reward repetition. It rewards improvement. You can do the same thing for years and still get the same result. Not because you don't try hard enough, but because you don't change how you do it. I once met someone. He did the same job for many years. He had experience. He understood the work, but his life didn't move forward. And when I asked him, what have you changed in how you work? He had no answer. He didn't lack time. He didn't lack opportunities. He only lacked one thing, difference in each day. I learned that if your today is exactly like your yesterday, then your tomorrow will also look like today. Not because you don't deserve more, but because you are repeating what created your current life. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you living or are you repeating? Because those two are not the same. Living means you are moving forward. Repeating means you are staying the same. And sometimes, staying the same for too long is actually a form of falling behind. I started to change when I asked myself one very simple question. What is different today compared to yesterday? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just slightly different. A new way of thinking, a new action, a different decision. And over time, those small changes began to create a new direction. You don't need to change your whole life in one day. You just need to stop repeating one day and then another. That's how you break out. But even when you start to change, even when you stop repeating unconsciously, there's still a mistake that keeps you from knowing where you are. A mistake that makes you think you're moving forward, while in reality, you don't know where you're going. And that's where we have to face something very few people want to look at. Mistake 4. You don't measure, so you don't change. I used to believe that as long as I tried, as long as I worked hard, things would eventually get better. It sounds right. It sounds positive. But there was something I didn't understand back then. If you don't measure, you don't truly know where you are. Imagine you are driving on a long road. You have no map, no signs, no speedometer. You're still driving, you're still moving, but you don't know if you're going fast or slow, if you're going in the right or wrong direction. Your life is the same. You work every day, you try every day. But if you don't look back, don't track, don't evaluate, then you're only feeling like you're improving, not actually improving. I used to be like that. There were periods when I thought I was doing well. I felt like I was moving forward. But when I looked back honestly, nothing had changed. Not because I didn't act, but because I didn't know whether I was doing things right or wrong. I didn't measure. I didn't know how much time I spent on important things. I didn't know how much I improved in my skills. I didn't know whether I was getting closer or just going in circles. And when you don't know, you can't adjust. I learned that life doesn't change just because you feel better. It changes when you do better clearly. And to do better, you have to see the truth. Not emotions, not assumptions, but the truth. I started with very simple things. I wrote down what I did each day. I reviewed how I used my time. I asked, is this actually moving me forward? And sometimes the answer wasn't comfortable. There were days I realized I had been busy, but not effective. There were weeks I realized I had tried, but not improved. But those moments were when everything started to change. Because once you see the truth, you can't keep living the same way. I want you to understand this. You cannot improve what you don't measure. You cannot change what you don't see. And if you keep living based on feelings, you will always think you are okay, even when you are standing still. I want you to pause and ask yourself, do you really know you're moving forward? Or are you just hoping that you are? Because those two are very different. A person who sees the truth can change. A person who relies on feelings will repeat. I've learned that average doesn't come from a lack of effort. It comes from a lack of clarity about yourself. If what I'm saying resonates with you, if you start to see yourself in these words, stay with me. And if you want to continue this journey, hit subscribe. Not because I have all the answers, but because we're learning to see life more clearly little by little. But even when you start measuring, even when you begin to see more clearly, there's still a deeper mistake. A mistake not in your actions, but in the standards you accept for yourself every day. And that's where everything quietly begins to take shape. Mistake 5. You accept average as your standard. I want you to look at something very simple. Your life always stops at the level you accept, not the level you dream of, not the level you say you want, but the level you allow. I used to think that as long as I had high goals, as long as I wanted more, my life would change. But I was wrong. Because you can want a lot, but if you accept little, you will always get little. Imagine a container. If you only fill it halfway, it will stop there. Not because it can't hold more, but because you decided that's enough. Your life is the same. You could do better at your job, but you choose to do enough. You could be more disciplined, but you choose today is fine. You could go further, but you tell yourself this is good enough. And little by little, good enough becomes your standard. I fell into that state before, not because I lacked ability, but because I got used to not demanding more from myself. I completed tasks, but not at my best. I kept promises, but only when it was easy. I moved forward, but only when it wasn't too hard. And over time, I didn't feel like I was falling behind. I just felt okay. And that is the most dangerous thing. Because when you feel okay, you stop changing. No pressure, no need to be better, no reason to push beyond yourself. And your life begins to stand still. I've learned that average is not an accident. It is a standard accepted every day. You don't become average because you can't do better. You become average because you stop demanding better from yourself. I want you to pause and ask yourself, what standard are you living by? The standard of comfort? or the standard of growth, because those two cannot coexist. If you choose comfort, you will keep ease, but you will lose progress. If you choose growth, you will face difficulty, but you will move forward. I began to change when I stopped asking, "Can I do this?" and started asking, "Can I do this better?" Just a small change in the question, but it changed how I lived every day. I no longer did enough. I started doing a little better, not perfect, just better than yesterday. And over time, my standard changed. And when your standard changes, your life changes. But even when you raise your standards, even when you stop accepting average, there's still something that can pull you back, something deeper than action, something in how you talk to yourself every day. And that's where we must face a very uncomfortable truth. Mistake 6, you tell yourself limiting stories every day. I've heard those sentences before, not from others, but from myself. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not good at this. I don't have that kind of discipline. Those sentences sound normal. No one argues with you. No one disagrees. But the problem is, you believe them. And when you believe, you start living by them. I used to think that what I told myself were just thoughts, just passing feelings. But over time, I realized they are not just thoughts. They are programming. Every time you repeat a statement about yourself, you reinforce an identity, and then you act according to that identity. If you believe you're not disciplined, you won't push when things get hard. If you believe you're not the kind of person who succeeds, you won't go far even when you have the chance. Not because you can't, but because you don't allow yourself to. I once knew someone. He always said, "I'm just an ordinary person." And he lived exactly like that. He didn't dare to try bigger things. He didn't step out of his comfort zone. He didn't set higher standards. Not because he lacked ability, but because he had decided who he was. I've learned that you don't live according to reality. You live according to how you define yourself. And if that definition is small, your life cannot be big. I remember a time when I started paying attention to what I told myself. Not when I was strong, but when I was weak, when I was tired, when I was disappointed, when I wanted to quit. That's when the truth shows up. And I realized that voice wasn't helping me move forward. It was keeping me in place, not by forcing me, but by convincing me that I couldn't be more. I began to change, not with fake positive statements, but with more honest ones. Instead of saying, "I can't," I said, "I haven't done it yet, but I can learn." Instead of saying, "I'm not that kind of person," I said, "I'm becoming that person." Not instantly, but little by little. And over time, the way I saw myself began to change. And when the way you see yourself changes, the way you act changes. I want you to pause and listen to yourself. What are you saying when no one is listening? Because that is where your life is shaped, not by circumstances, but by the sentences you repeat every day. But even when you start changing how you talk to yourself, even when you begin to believe in a better version of yourself, there is still a very common trap, a trap that makes you act only when things feel right. And that's where many people return to the starting point without understanding why. Mistake 7, you only act when you feel motivated. I used to live that way. On days I felt good, I did a lot. I had energy. I had focus. I felt like I was moving forward. But on days I didn't feel that way, I stopped. I told myself, today isn't my day. I'll start again tomorrow. And tomorrow became a familiar loop. Do you see this? If you only act when you feel motivated, you will only move forward when life feels easy. But life is not always easy. There are days you're tired. There are days you doubt yourself. There are days you don't want to do anything at all. And if on those days you stop, then those exact days will determine how far you don't go. I've learned that motivation is a visitor. It comes when it wants. It leaves without warning. If you depend on it, you will always be passive. You will always be waiting. And while you wait, life keeps moving. I once met someone. He always said, when I feel motivated, I'll do it. It sounds reasonable. But the problem is, motivation does not come to someone standing still. It comes to someone already moving. I started to change when I stopped asking, do I feel motivated today? And started asking, will I do it today? That's it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be much. Just do it. Some days I did very little. Some days I didn't do it well. But I still did it. And over time, that created something stronger than motivation. Consistency. I no longer depended on how I felt. I depended on what I did. And that created results. I want you to understand this. If you want to become a different person, you cannot live by the same emotions. You cannot let the days you don't feel like it decide your direction. The people who go far are not the ones who always feel motivated. They are the ones who keep going even without it. I've learned that discipline is not doing things when you feel strong. It is doing them when you don't want to. And those days are the ones that make the difference. But even when you start acting more consistently, even when you no longer depend on motivation, there is still a very common mistake. A mistake that makes you see others move forward while you stay the same. And that's where we need to talk about how you look at others. Mistake 8, you compare, but you don't change. I used to look at other people's lives and ask myself, why can they do it but I can't? They moved forward, they grew, they seemed to be living a different life. And I stood there watching, not with jealousy, but with confusion. I thought that if I observed long enough, if I understood enough, I would know what to do. But I was wrong, because observation does not create change. Comparison does not create progress. Imagine you are standing next to a racetrack. You watch others run. You see they are faster. You see they go further. And you stand there analyzing. You notice their technique. You understand how they move. But if you don't step onto the track, you will never move forward. Your life is the same. You can watch others succeed. You can read about them. You can understand how they think. But if you don't change your actions, everything stays the same. I was stuck in that. I knew a lot. I understood a lot, but my life didn't change accordingly because I was replacing action with awareness. I thought understanding was enough, but it's not. Understanding is only the beginning. Change is what creates results. I once knew someone. He always talked about successful people. He analyzed them. He said he knew what they did, but his life stayed the same. Not because he lacked knowledge, but because he didn't turn that knowledge into action. I've learned that comparison only has value when it leads to change. Otherwise, it's just a subtle way to make you feel like you're progressing, when in reality, you're standing still. I want you to pause and ask yourself, are you looking at others to learn or to delay changing yourself? Because there is a big difference. One person looks, then acts. Another person looks, then keeps looking. And over time, the gap between them keeps growing. I changed when I stopped asking, what are they doing? And started asking, what will I do right now? Just one small action, just one step. It doesn't have to be perfect, just real. And over time, those small steps created real change. But even when you start taking action, even when you stop just watching others, there is still a very common mistake. A mistake that makes you want to change your life, but ignore the only thing that can make it happen. And that's where we have to look at the small things. Mistake 9, you want big change, but ignore small actions. I used to think that if I wanted to change my life, I needed to do something big, a strong decision, a bold move, a clear transformation. It sounds right, but that's not how life works. Imagine you want to build wealth. You don't start with a large amount of money. You start with small amounts, saved and accumulated. $1 doesn't change your life, but $1 every day for years creates a different outcome. Your life works the same way. You don't change through one big decision. You change through small actions, repeated long enough. But the problem is, small things are not impressive. They don't make you feel like you're doing something important. They don't create immediate results. And so you ignore them. You say, this is too small. This doesn't make a difference. And you wait for something bigger. I was stuck in that. I wanted faster change. I wanted clearer results. And I ignored the small things because they didn't feel significant. But over time, I realized those small things are exactly where life changes. Not because they are big, but because they are repeated. I once knew someone. He didn't do anything extraordinary. Every day, he just did one thing slightly better, learned a little more, saved a little more, improved a little more. No big leaps, no sudden breakthroughs, but over time, his life started moving in a different direction. Not because he did something big, but because he didn't ignore small things. I've learned that small things are the only things you can control every day. You can't change your whole life at once, but you can change one action today. And when you do that, you start changing your direction. I want you to pause and ask yourself, are you waiting for a big change or are you building a small one? Because one of those will never happen. Big change rarely comes first. It is the result of small changes. I started moving forward when I stopped looking for leaps and started respecting each small step. Not because they are big, but because they are real enough to repeat. But even when you start paying attention to small things, even when you stop ignoring simple actions, there is still one final truth. A truth that if you don't realize, you will keep living the same way without understanding why. And that is something very few people realize until it is too late. Mistake 10. You don't realize average is built every day. I used to think that if my life wasn't going in the right direction, there would be a clear moment, a big failure, a serious mistake, a fall I could point to and say, that's the reason. But life doesn't work like that. There isn't a day you wake up and suddenly become average. There isn't a single decision that alone takes you there. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It happens quietly. One easy choice today, one delay tomorrow, one moment of accepting this is enough the day after. And then you repeat, not once, but hundreds of times. And over time, those small things begin to accumulate. Not big enough for you to notice immediately, but enough to shape your life. I lived in that state without realizing it. I didn't see myself as failing. I didn't see myself going the wrong way. I just felt like I was living. And that is the most dangerous thing. Because when things aren't bad, you have no reason to change, no warning, no pressure, just stability, quietly taking you away from where you could be. I've learned that average is not a destination, it is a process built by what you do every day. Not by what you say, not by what you want, but by what you repeat. I want you to pause for a moment and look at your life. Not at your big goals, not at your long-term plans, but at today. What did you do? What did you choose? What did you repeat? Because if you don't change today, tomorrow will look the same. And if that continues, your life will follow that direction. Not because you don't deserve more, but because you are building less every day. I changed, not when I had a big idea, but when I realized something very simple. Every day is shaping me. There is no unimportant day. There is no too small choice. Everything adds up. And when you understand that, you can't live the same way anymore. You become more aware. You choose more carefully. You start living more consciously. Not perfectly, but no longer unconsciously. You are not stuck because you're not good enough. You are stuck because you are repeating. And the moment you break that repetition, you begin to change. I want you to look back at everything we've gone through. There are no big mistakes here. Nothing overly complex. Just small choices, small habits, small thoughts, repeated every day. You choose easy. You delay what matters. You repeat yesterday. You don't measure. You accept average. You tell yourself limits. You wait for motivation. You compare without changing. You ignore the small things. And then you don't realize that all of it is building your life. Not once, but every day. But if that is true, then something else is also true. You can change your life in the exact same way. You don't need a big decision. You don't need a turning point. You just need to change what you repeat. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to change everything today. I'm just asking you one question. Tomorrow, what will you repeat? If you choose better, even just a little, your life will begin moving in a different direction. If this resonates with you, leave a like. And if you want to continue this journey, subscribe. Not to hear more, but to remind yourself to live better each day. And I want to ask you, will you keep living a day like yesterday, or will you create something different? I've spent my whole life learning this one thing. You don't change your life in a day, but you change its direction every day. I truly appreciate you staying until the end of this video.